Hey Kings, welcome back to the Augustus Maximus channel for the final episode of the Greek playthrough using the Minor Factions Revenge mod for Empire Total War. Now, essentially, since this is the final episode and recovering the mantle of Alexander the Great, as in we're trying to push towards India, towards the very borders of India, not actually going into India that far, just managing the borders because that's roughly historically accurate, and going into India anyway would, well, it would be not actually all that beneficial because it means we'd capture just like 2 or 3 settlements from the Maratha Confederacy, and since they're currently our allies, that would be kinda bad. But here we go, the battle begins. We are trying to push east, and here we go. Oh wait, it's another night battle where you can hardly see anything and the enemy brings a lot of melee troops and carbine cavalry. Yeah, skip. But it was a victory anyway, because we used the standard tactics, and even though we did have quite a bit of losses, ultimately we won anyway. And that's sort of the theme of this entire episode. I just want to go over, the entire playthrough, what my feelings about it are, how this whole thing progressed, and even this final little push here, because obviously it's a post-commentary. I think that this style of post-commentary fits Total War more than anything. So, using the Minor Factions Revenge mod, my thoughts about it, sort of a minor review. I think it's a great mod in terms of what it allows you to do on the campaign map. It's a great mod when it comes to the minor factions, obviously, which is the sort of the main goal of the whole thing. It's a minor factions revenge mod. It allows you to play minor factions. Without this mod, we wouldn't be able to play Greece because it's not a playable faction or a country within the boundaries of vanilla Empire Total War. I think they can rise up if they, I think the faction can actually rise up within the later stages of the campaign if there are severe revolts within the Ottoman territories, but other than that situation, you don't actually get the ability to play Greece or interact with Greece in any meaningful way. So, from that standpoint, the Minor Factions Revenge mod is actually great. When it comes to the unit selection, the unit selection I think is decent. It's not quite so overwhelming as maybe other mods such as Imperial Splendor. If you've ever played that mod and try to play as Prussia or Austria or any of the Central to Eastern European countries, or maybe even the United States, you know that there's this overwhelming amount of units that are essentially just carbon copies of each other with the minor reskinned details and maybe an extra 1 attack and a -1 defense compared to essentially the same unit, which has sort of the reverse of those stats, and it's not meaningful enough. Whereas with the Minor Factions Revenge mod, you do actually get a very decent variety of units with sort of meaningful changes. As for Greece itself, one thing that was a little bit jarring to me is just how much of the Ottoman roster is reused for the Greeks, which I didn't find to be that appealing, because the majority of this campaign was obviously about reclaiming the Eastern Roman Empire from the Ottomans and using very Eurocentric tactics and very Eurocentric armies to really achieve that goal, trying to become this European power and to essentially re-establish this Eastern European presence within the Levant, within Egypt, and within basically the former territories of the Eastern Roman Empire. So it's the amount of Ottoman troops for Greece was a little bit jarring to me. It was a little bit annoying because not only is there an overwhelming presence of Ottoman troops, there's also a very lackluster presence of European troops, and that's not exactly very encouraging, because you basically have to spam the same unit of line infantry and the very few units of cavalry that you get at the beginning that are somewhat European. And once you push into the Levant and into the Middle East, you do actually get a few European troops. However, the issue with that is that they're just categorized as colonial troops because you're no longer on the mainland of Europe. You're technically in Asia or in Africa, or moving towards India essentially. So they're colonial troops, and whilst the colonial troops are basically the same as just European line infantry, it's not, well, it's just not the same, is it? You're basically just using colonial troops and troops that you would not be able to recruit in your home territories for whatever reason, even though, well, you have an overwhelming amount of Ottoman troops that you can recruit. And that's, well, that's neat from a certain point of view, because obviously the Ottoman Empire has been present within the region for quite a while. You would assume that the initial troops that you would use as Greece would be very similar to those of the Ottoman Empire, because that's the equipment, that's the doctrine that's most readily available to them. It's also, a bit anti-roleplay, but I understand why the mod developers went with this sort of tactic. It's sort of understandable. For example, Scotland uses very similar units to that of the United Kingdom, and any factions that emerge from, for example, France, they used almost the exact units as France, so it makes sense from that point of view. But since we're going for this little roleplay here, it was a bit jarring. Another thing that was very interesting from the Minor Factions Revenge mod was the night battles. The night battles, they are interesting from a certain point of view. The main issue I have with them is that there's no clear distinction when it comes to deploying into the battle itself, if it's a night battle or if it's just a regular battle. This is because the night state isn't actually available in vanilla, and so it's basically treated as just a weather condition. And while that makes sense from a certain point of view, from a different point of view, it's incredibly annoying because in night battles you can't actually see that much. It's extremely dark, and you're basically sort of not actually having the proper experience of playing a battle, thus leading to unnecessary losses, which is realistic. Obviously, during night battles the generals wouldn't be able to see as much as during the day, which is why, well, sometimes obviously night battles were preferred if you're trying to lay an ambush, etc., etc. I'm pretty sure this is a relatively well understood fact. However, from a gameplay perspective, it's incredibly annoying to not know that you're actually deploying into a night battle, and well, I'd rather avoid them, so I'd rather just auto-resolve the night battles. However, you can't do that because there is no clear distinction, so you might pop into a night battle even though, well, you didn't mean to pop into a night battle. So, it's clearly annoying. However, it's something that could have been avoided entirely by just not including the night battles, which is something, for example, I think a majority of mods for Empire Total War don't actually include such a mechanic as night battles. I'm pretty sure through all the, well, dozens of mods and hundreds of hours, I've only ever encountered night battles within the Minor Factions Revenge mod. So if that's something that really sounds like it's a great thing to you and you really are inclined to play these night battles, then sure, go ahead. But it's not something that I personally prefer. I think this comes down to personal preference quite a bit. And so the night battles for me were just a bit annoying and led to just a bit too many casualties for me to truly appreciate them. However, I understand why. From an aesthetic point of view they might be actually quite a bit decent. But for example, since night battles aren't actually fully implemented into vanilla Empire Total War, you don't actually get many benefits from them. And I think it was the older Total War titles, I think starting with Rome 1, but I could be wrong about this. Actually, I think Medieval 2. I think once you have night battles there, it essentially functioned as a lightning strike mechanic, where you sometimes your general would have increased abilities. Especially Shogun 2 clearly showcased this, where some generals were just better during the night, and your reserve armies wouldn't be present. However, neither would be reserve armies or the reinforcing armies of the enemy. So this night battle situation is it's quite a bit annoying to me. But I understand why some people might like it, and I understand why the the mod developers would like something like this to be present. I just wish that it would be more clear whether this was a night battle or not. But because it's treated as a weather condition, obviously you can't fully see or access this sort of point of view. But from the mod perspective, I think actually Minor Factions Revenge is very nicely done. I think it's amazing. If you want to play as Minor Factions, and Empire Total War is probably one of the better mods. But I think other mods also do something similar. But Minor Factions Revenge mod is sort of just Vanilla Plus. It does give you some extra things on top of Vanilla. However, it doesn't alter the game in any sort of really significant way. It gives you a few more troops, it gives you a few more options to build, few more settlements, the access to night battles, and more factions, obviously, which is sort of the main thing that the mod gives you. However, it doesn't alter the game in any sort of significant way, as would, for example, Imperial Splendor or Darth mod or any mod from the wide selection of mods. For example, the Blue and the Grey, the American Civil War mod, for example, is probably the most game-altering mod there is right now for Empire Total War. So it's a very big contrast to those mods, but it also alters the vanilla experience in sort of a pleasant way. I think if I ever play Empire Total War again, I'd be more inclined to go for the Minor Faction Revenge mod than for example, I don't know, Darth mod, Imperial Sprint, or something like this, because I do actually enjoy the vanilla experience. If you don't, then it's obvious that you would be happier to go for some of the other mods, but I do really enjoy this one. Now, for the gameplay of Greece itself and this little campaign that we have going on here, it's quite interesting. The way I approached it was that, for example, compared to Rome, you're trying to re-establish the more Greek portion of Rome, and Greece, ancient Greece, is sort of more synonymous with the ideas of liberty and the sort of freedom of thought. Well, not exactly in all the portions, but this is the sort of generic ideal that you have. The sort of more educated, more liberal, I suppose, from an ancient point of view, in terms of the ideological spectrum of the ancient world. I suppose Greece would be the most like enlightened, free thought, free thinking portion of Europe. Mostly focusing on Europe now. And so I went with the almost no taxation model, because I thought, that would be great. It'd be great to test out this theory that growth of your individual settlements, individual regions, is somehow supposed to counteract the negatives of basically having no tax income. However, what you very quickly find is that it's unsustainable if you actually want to grow a very large empire. Which makes sense, obviously, because this sort of very low taxation model, while it gives you a lot of growth, it gives you a lot of public bonuses. Conquering new territories is actually relatively easy, because they tend to be happy with your presence, because you have no taxes. The territories are, well, the happiness just grows quite a bit quicker because there's no tax burden, public order, a negative bonus, or whatever. Con, I suppose, there's no modifier that would affect the new settlements. However, what you find is, and what I found within this campaign, because it was the first time I really tried something like this in Empire Total War, mostly inspired by the newer titles, growth is a very big factor within the newer games, is that it's very fragile. It's extremely fragile, because the growth and the new settlements that you get, the settlements simply don't grow quickly enough. And so what you find is that you rely on trade, and when your trade income gets raided, because there's a singular trade line from your capital city to any other capital city of any other faction you're trading with, you're done. You have zero income, and oh, by the way, this battle right here is probably one of the most difficult battles in the entire campaign. And of all people, it's against the Persians, right? I mean, that's thematic. That's as thematic as you can get with this sort of reclaiming the mantle of Alexander the Great. It's sort of very cute. It's quite interesting. I like it. But the main reason why this battle was so annoying is that while the enemy, yes, is selling out against us, because they have so much artillery, they were able to completely annihilate their walls, and they actually just completely destroyed their own town just to have a clear shot at me. It's quite hilarious. But yeah, the AI in Empire Total War is just magnificent, obviously. But what that means is that the AI just simply refused to sally out against me because they had a clear shot with their artillery against my units, even though they killed maybe like 4 troops throughout the entire battle. Because of artillery, they basically just refused to sally out because the AI saw that they had a ranged advantage. Even though they were technically the attacker, it's sort of silly like that. Empire Total War just had very weird mechanics in terms of this sort of aspect, and so we actually had to assault the city. However, because they destroyed their own walls, it was mostly just, I don't know. It was a very strange battle and a very tough one, to be sure. But there we go, it's against the Persians. However, at this point, compared to the early point where within the campaign, we're no longer just small, fragile Greece trying to somehow take a few territories here and there from the Ottoman Empire. No, we are the re-established Eastern Roman Empire claiming the mantle of Alexander the Great. Absolutely epic, as my soldiers do nothing. So, yeah, very Roman of them. Very Roman of them. But there we go. So, as I was talking about the taxation model, the low taxation model, it's in theory, it's great. In theory, if you're turtle-like enough, if you have basically 0 enemies, it's magnificent because your towns grow to quite a large extent. You have new towns emerging almost every turn if you have a large enough amount of territory. And the populace is extremely happy with you. And conquering new territory is also very easy because they immediately become immediately the public order issues are resolved. Almost immediately, within 1 or 2 turns, usually the public order issues are resolved. However, again, very fragile. You get one country that raids your ports or raids your trade lines, trade routes. You're done for. You have 0 income because the emergent towns and the growth of your town simply doesn't make up for just 1 or 2 full stacks of armies. It just doesn't make up for it, and it's simply not enough. You also have basically zero. Have a zero. You have 0 reassurance if something like that happens because you're so reliant on trade and the emergent towns, the wealth from those towns and from the various traders and the buildings that you build up. It simply isn't enough, even as this large empire, the East Roman Empire, conquering almost the entirety of the former Ottoman Empire, and then conquering even further into the Balkans, and then conquering further into the Middle East. The wealth from those towns and the wealth from those provinces and cities isn't enough to maintain 3 full stack armies. Without trade, we'd be done. And so in Empire Total War, it's very much about building a trade empire and a rich empire instead of building a wide empire. And this is exactly why. So whilst this sort of approach might work in something like Rome 2 or Attila, you have issues with money in that game, even though you have a wide and trade empire. So in Attila, a variety of things could be true, but a majority of them isn't actually the case when it comes to attaining money, especially as the Western Romans. But in Empire Total War, this sort of approach is not sustainable. It's not sustainable without trade. Now, because we have all these wealthy provinces, and because we have all these, resources, I suppose, from these provinces, because the Middle East actually does have quite a few wealthy provinces for trade. We can trade quite successfully, mostly because this is another thing that's sort of interesting about this campaign. A majority of the people of the world, just a majority of factions, bar one or two, had very friendly relations with us, which was actually extremely curious. Even people we were at war with, for example the Persians, this entire time we are fighting them, we are conquering their cities, their territory, some of the toughest battles in the entire campaign, such as the siege here, and they had very friendly relations with us. And now I'm not entirely sure if this is because of the trade, or if this is just because, I don't know, we let our ministers level up quite nicely, because we have, I think, like 4 turns per year. I had the 4 turns per year setting on. I think it's 4 turns per year, I'm pretty sure. And so Not entirely sure if that was the case, or if it's because of the trade, or if it's because we're just the Greeks and the people love the Greeks, or if it's because we were fighting the Ottomans and people just love it when you fight the Ottomans. I'm not entirely sure why that is, but we had an extremely friendly relations with basically every single faction. And every single important faction at that. Even we were allied with the Russians, and the Prussians themselves just went absolutely ballistic against Russia. They basically conquered the entirety of Russia by the time we were done with the Ottomans. And even though we were allied with Russia, the Prussians loved us as well. So this is something, I'm not entirely sure if this is the mods doing, or it's because we have low taxes, or if it's because we have just amazing ministers and an amazing king, obviously. Not entirely sure, but that's just how it was. So this campaign, the battles and everything like that, it was quite the experience. Something I've never quite experienced in Empire Total War before. The low taxation combined with being extremely friendly with everyone, which is actually the most jarring thing, because if you ever played, for example, Prussia, try playing Prussia on hard difficulty. You try to conquer one territory, you try to conquer one settlement, one city, the entire world hates you, they immediately pounce on you. It's sort of strange like that. The same thing happens with Sweden, the United Kingdom to somewhat lesser extent, but it's still there. And so it's very interesting. It's very interesting that we managed to do something like this. It might be because of the ministers or the king, or just because we're Greece, and Greece is amazing, and the East Roman Empire is amazing, obviously, as all Roman empires are amazing. And so there we go. All Roman empires are beautiful, remember that. And so, it's quite, it was quite an interesting campaign, but this battle is actually, looking back at it, this is like a very strange battle. It's almost like Medieval 1 or Rome 1, basically. Medieval 1, Medieval 2, Medieval 2 Total War with like extremely long melee battles. This is quite a sight to behold. But of course we ultimately won that battle. We conquered Persia, or modern day Iran, but it's called Persia, so we had our toughest fights against the Persians. So yeah, that's actually something interesting about Empire Total War and Napoleon Total War in general. But especially Empire Total War is that some of the minor factions, especially in the Middle East and India, they can put up such a magnificent fight. It's amazing. The minor factions, for example, when we were fighting against the Ottomans, which is sort of a great power, a major faction, it's been around these places for hundreds of years at this point, and they were nothing. We never lost a single unit to them. We never really took any serious damage. We never really had any sort of tough war against them, even though it's on hard difficulty, and even though, it's a mod I've never played before, even though we have such a fragile taxation model, economic model at that. We never really encountered any serious resistance. The most resistance we encountered was around the trio of, basically Jerusalem and Damascus, those two final cities, and even then we just blew them out of the water. It might be because we chose sort of a more... I just like to use the plural. I chose this sort of very careful tactic when approaching the Ottomans, just dismantling them very slowly one at a time, and even though the Ottomans weren't really involved in any sort of other major strategic conflict, because we destroyed their beginning armies, their initial armies with such magnificent strategic and tactical efficiency, they weren't ever really able to recover from that. And the minor factions in Empire Total War and Napoleon Total War, sort of 50-50 is almost the exact same in both of these games. The minor factions actually, they can maintain like 3 to 4 full stack armies within like one territory. It's almost insane. They have some very serious bonuses. But as you saw, for example, when we were playing Greece, we could afford maybe 1 full stack army without any serious economic issues when we owned 2 territories, and 2 actually relatively wealthy territories, and were trading with a majority of Europe, or at least the nations in Europe that were close to us. They were quite wealthy, and those territories were quite wealthy. We could barely maintain 1 full stack army, and so it's quite a conundrum just how powerful these minor nations are. If you were to translate that into, for example, Russia or Prussia or the United Kingdom, then you'd be facing like 20 full stack armies, right? But no, in fact, defeating the major factions, actually some of the the easiest thing ever in Empire and Napoleon. So, well, except for obviously the French in Napoleon Total War, because that's quite something. But in Empire Total War, there's nothing like that. There's no equivalent when fighting against major nations. In this mod, actually, because the French do have Napoleon, it might be something similar, and that's a campaign that could be actually interesting somewhere down the line in the future, playing as France and trying to, in this later start, and trying to sort of reimagine the Napoleonic Wars, invading Britain, because that's the easiest thing ever in any Total War game, actually, and just dismantling them, conquering the British Isles, and then moving on into the rest of Europe. Even Prussia could be interesting, because obviously they have some major buffs in this mod. Look at the minimap. The Russians are gone, basically. It's all Prussia, and always has been. It's like World War I status of the German Empire after the Brest-Litovsk. Even better than that. So it's actually quite insane. But ultimately, as we move through Afghanistan, it turns out that they're not actually the bane of empires in Empire Total War. They're actually just well, fuel for the Greek Empire, as it would appear. And so we're just making swift progress here, but at this point I wasn't really worried. At the beginning of the campaign, and especially before the conquest of Constantinople, I was actually quite worried about this whole thing, because we're playing a minor power, and immediately we have to fight against a major power. That's not something you really want. When playing a strategy game, what you initially want to do is sort of, if you're a minor power and there are other minor powers around you, you sort of want to consolidate the power, maybe confederate with them. For example, in Warhammer Total War, this is extremely apparent with, for example, the Empire. You definitely want to confederate those guys, and even the Vampire Counts, you want to confederate those guys to attain sort of a larger status. And so it was sort of jarring to play as a very minor faction and going up against a very big faction, but ultimately the Ottomans were more of a pushover, because even in this game, and in any Total War game, they're sort of the sick men of Europe from the beginning. Like, even from, if you ever play Medieval 2 and fight against the Turks, even though they're obviously not a one-to-one correct historical interpretation of the Ottomans, you can very easily just take them out, even as the Byzantines, as they are called in that game. Obviously, it's the Eastern Roman Empire, but okay, semantics. It's all very strange in these Total War games. For example, Istanbul is called Istanbul, even though it's Constantinople. And so you could definitely say that they didn't really care too much when making Empire Total War. I think, yeah, even in Napoleon Total War, it's actually called Istanbul. That's kind of strange, but ultimately I think this campaign went very well, even though we had some issues with night battles and the taxation model, and the troops just defaultly being more Ottoman-like than European-like, which I actually have to find a mod that does the Greeks justice. I think there are a few mods in Napoleon Total War that actually do a very good job when portraying the Greeks. They make them a more European faction more than an Ottoman faction, which is appropriate, obviously. But in Empire Total War, I don't think there are many sort of mods that allow you to play as minor factions to such detail as the minor faction revenge mod, and so many minor factions. That's really where this mod excels, is that there are so many minor factions, you can just take them all out if you really wish to. For example, in vanilla Empire Total War, actually conquering the Middle East and pushing into Persia, pushing towards India, essentially, is the easiest thing ever. Even though they have so many bonuses, their units are just bad, they're just terrible. And so actually seeing them put up a good fight was sort of a breath of fresh air, because those units that they received in this mod, and those bonuses they received in this mod, actually made this a more interesting final episode of the campaign, at least from the gameplay perspective. I hope it did. And so it's really a good mod. It was overall a very good experience. And now all that's left to do is actually finalize the conquest of Afghanistan. And because it's a Total War game, it's a Total War playthrough, and we're playing as Eastern Rome, And Rome 2 more rather, is famous for its auto-resolves. I think it would be very appropriate to auto-resolve this final fight. A bunch of times, actually. Let's auto-resolve this final fight. And anyway, they have the very standard army, the one that we faced throughout this entire campaign. It's a lot of melee, a lot of artillery, a lot of carabiners? Yeah, a lot of carabine cavalry. And there we go, victory. We've successfully conquered from Greece, reclaimed Constantinople, reclaimed Anatolia, reclaimed the Levant, reclaimed Alexandria, well, Egypt, Cairo in this game. And we pushed into the Middle East, reclaimed the empire of Alexander the Great, and now we have combined the two most famous empires of the Greeks ever, basically. We could push even further into India, but the Indians are our allies, and some of the most trade we actually get is from the Indians, so I don't necessarily want to, push too many buttons there and end up bankrupt again. So there we go. This was the final push of this magnificent Greek empire, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. It was actually a very beautiful campaign, and was it sort of limited in scope? I don't necessarily like to go for all the victory conditions, because they're sometimes sort of cheap and it doesn't really make sense. For example, I think we'd have to actually betray Austria, even though they were the best allies we've had this entire game. They kept our northern front safe from basically everyone and anyone, and they actually carved out a decent empire for themselves in Italy as well. So there we go. Overall, beautiful campaign. Love the mod. I love the idea, essentially. Just East Roman Empire combined with the Macedonian Empire. Bam, there we go. The two best Greek empires combined into one. Absolutely magnificent. In the 19th century at this point. Yeah, we're actually in the 19th century. So, there we go. Thanks, Kings, for watching, and see you in the next campaign.